And welcome to the Godless Bitches podcast. This is your host, Beth Presswood, here with Tracie Harris.
Howdy.
And special guest, Twinkie D.
Hey, everybody.
So, Godless Bitches is sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational group dedicated to the separation of church and state and the promotion of positive atheist culture. You can email us at bitches@atheist-community.org or look at our shows, or listen to our shows at godlessbitches.podbean.com and look at the comments there. So, how is everybody today?
Doing great.
Good.
Well, we've actually tried to do this podcast before, and we had a little mess up, so hopefully this is going to go as well as our conversation was going. So, Twinkie D is our special guest today. She has a very compelling story, and she lives in Mississippi. A wonderful, wonderful state, about as wonderful as Tennessee. So I'm pretty much going to let her talk about what she experiences there and her background and her story. So Twinkie, you were telling us about some of the organizations that are there in your part of Mississippi.
Yes, I live in Northeast Mississippi, which is pretty much overshadowed by the American Family Association. Their headquarters is about an hour south of me. That's run by Don Wildman. He's a Methodist preacher who started off in the 70s with a decency campaign against the FCC because, television obviously should be clean and wholesome. And pretty much they have morphed into a Christian theocracy / anti-gay so-called family association. And they have radio and television networks all over the place now. And they pretty much, they have a lot of power in Northeast Mississippi. So we're dominated by that.
Right. So you were telling us, every time you go into a restaurant or somewhere.
Yes. Anytime you go to a restaurant or a place where there's a television, you're going to be watching Fox News. That's a given. If it's a place that has radio music, you will be listening to the American Family Radio, which means Christian music and Christian talk. There really aren't that many other options. That's what you're going to be listening to.
Right, and you were saying that your family personally knows some of the Wildmans.
Yes, Don Wildman's mother was my kindergarten teacher and was my dad's first grade teacher, so we actually knew the family on a personal level, and she was a very lovely lady. Unlike her son and grandson. She was very good, and she actually encouraged me toward sciences and education, believe it or not.
Yes, believe it or not. So people often don't believe me when I talk about some of the challenges atheists face, especially in the South. Maybe they just don't want to believe me, but can you tell me about some of the things, jobs and whatnot, and how being an atheist can impact you in a place like Mississippi?
Sure. Basically, when it comes to professional jobs, it's not what you can do. It's not your level of education. It's who you go to church with. That determines largely the good jobs, who gets those, who gets promotions, things like that. One of the first questions you're going to be asked when you move to an area up here or you try to get a job up here, what church do you go to? Oh, yeah, I got friends that go there. Or, I don't know that church. Everything revolves around that. Everything. And I know, of course, they're not supposed to ask you stuff like that on the job, but they will. They will. Right. So we have a lot of atheists who don't come out specifically because they fear they will lose their jobs or lose any future prospects.
Right. And, yeah, people say, oh, it's illegal. Oh, it's legal. Well, that doesn't matter to them. They think they're above the law. They really do. God's law, not
exactly
man's law.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's true also with other things like discrimination against whether it's race, religion, disability. I've been on the receiving end of a couple of those, and it doesn't matter that it's not legal. When everybody's doing it, or at least refusing to stand against it, that's the way it is.
Yeah, and people just feel powerless to stop it because even the people that you're supposed to go to aren't going to listen to you half the time or more.
Exactly, and you will be retaliated against. It's just a given. You will be.
Right. So, Mississippi was in the news a little while back for the Personhood Amendment, which we've talked a lot about that here on GB. But amazingly enough, it didn't pass, even in Mississippi. So, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, despite the fact that this state is crazy and deeply conservative, there are a lot of reasonable people here. We kind of have to keep it under wraps, but you'd be surprised at the level of courage and strength, especially among the women here who have gone through things, and we tapped into that early on. Initiative 26 was actually illegal from the get-go because you're not supposed to amend the Mississippi Constitution through a ballot initiative, but they did it anyway because the court basically said, well, it hasn't been done yet, so we can't really rule on it, which was a cop-out. So they went ahead and pressed with it, and they were rank amateurs at it because what they had on their website was basically, we're going to get rid of birth control. We're going to get rid of IVF. We're going to criminalize miscarriage. And they were stupid enough to actually put that up where somebody could see it. And so when we started calling attention to these things and getting the message out, they quickly redesigned their website to say, oh no, we would never do such a thing. But it was too late because I'd already captured the screenshots and saved the pages. And so we took great delight in letting everybody know what liars they were.
Good.
Sounds awesome. So yeah, the whole ballot initiative was illegal, but the court wouldn't enjoin it because they said that it actually had to be violated first before they could rule, or something to that effect. Which, I mean, I guess legally in some weird way it probably makes sense to them, but not to me. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know the specifics of this case. And maybe it was abused in this case, but I do know that they don't rule on things that don't come before them. And if there's no precedent, then there's no, the court itself can't insert itself unless somebody brings a case to them. Like the court becomes active when somebody brings the case to the court. Right. That was kind of what was that book, The Candidate Without a Prayer, Silverman's book. That was kind of what he ran into, was the idea that they had to have certain sorts of somebody that's involved in it in order to come forward and sue.
Right, and you have to have standing and all that. So yeah,
and they did actually do that. They did actually go to court, and basically the court said, well, we can't really do anything until after it passes because only then do you have an infraction. So
even if it had passed, it wouldn't have been the next day all this stuff would have been illegal.
Right, because we would have fought to overturn it just on the technicality. And here's the funny thing, the new initiative, they're doing the same thing.
So there's a new initiative too right now?
Yes, there is a new initiative, and it's a ballot initiative to amend the Constitution. Even though they know it's illegal, they're doing it again.
Well, what do they think's going to happen? Are they just idiots?
Yes, apparently so, and I'll tell you why. Because they got caught lying so much in the original personhood, they've made this new one real simple, and they're trying to convince everybody that, Planned Parenthood just put, I think they quoted $2 million, which is not even true, and they just lied to everybody. So here's the text of the new one. It's to amend the Constitution to say, quote, "The right to life begins at conception. All human beings at every stage of development are unique, created in God's image, and shall have equal rights as persons under the law."
I'm sure that's going to fly constitutionally.
Mm-hmm. But it'll get the votes. It'll get the votes, and then if it's overturned, they can say, "Oh, look, the judiciary overturning the will of the people were so oppressed," and they raise money on that.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Beth, when you were saying why are they doing this again? I know you know this, but it's like it's the same sorts of things that we see all the time. How many times are they going to bring up? They just push the envelope every single time about church and state with the schools, for example, and they will take every single time there's an infraction of church in the school, they take it to court, and sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. But instead of just saying, oh, well, this is a costly court thing, and really we shouldn't be doing this, so, let's not push the envelope here to see how close to illegal we can get. That's not what they're like. They're like, let's see if we can subvert the law. Let's see if we can get around the law. Let's see if we can do what we want to do despite the law. Let's see if we can, slide it in under the radar and break the law. That's what these activist Christians are like.
That's true, and I'm sure it's a good fundraiser for them. But like speaking about the schools, one of our schools here, I think it's North Pontotoc, years ago, had a major lawsuit about school prayer, and it actually came from a Lutheran family who they ended up running out of town. And the courts ruled against them. They lost money, they lost the case, and now today, here, I guess 10, 15 years later, they're doing the same thing again. They don't care. They don't care what the law says.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and if somebody wants to challenge it, that person has to take on personal expense.
Yes, and down here,
the student who says, I don't think this is right, and I don't think that this should be pushed on me, then that student has to go up against the school district.
Mm-hmm. And anyone who does challenge stuff like that in the community, you will get death threats. You will have threats to burn your house down. Your pets will be threatened or killed. It's just going to happen until you drop it and leave town. I've seen it happen over and over with actual personal friends of mine who basically just said, hey, I've got a kid and this is traumatizing my child. I can't do it. We're out of here.
Well, it's just like the young woman. Who's the young woman, Beth, that does a lot of the talk circuit?
Jessica Alquist.
Yeah, Jessica. The response that she got, I mean, it was, I guess, it's a sad commentary, but to a certain extent, you expect immature reaction from immature people. Mm-hmm. So the idea that her peers would be bullying and vile, to some degree, you're thinking, well, these are immature people. They're underage and they haven't developed fully their sense of how to behave and propriety and all of that. And so you kind of expect them to some degree, be a little bit out of control in their commentary and how they react because they're still learning how to act like adults. And then she starts to talk about the messages that she got from teachers and comments from parents. And you're just like, I don't even know. There's no excuse. I don't have an excuse for that. There's no way to try to explain how an adult could say such vile things to a young woman who's simply asserting her rights.
Right. It's amazing the things that people will say. I mean, like you said, adults, leaders in the community, leaders in the church. And basically, I think it's pure tribalism down here because what you have is like if you're part of that in-group, if you're part of that church family or that community, they're going to treat you like gold. They'll be the best people you've ever seen. But if you're not part of that community, if you've done something that sets you apart from them, watch out.
Let me run a couple things past you. I don't want to spend too much time because I know you've got a story to tell. But there's two things that what you're talking about reminds me of. And one is just real quickly, the out and in-group issue that you're talking about. I recently did a blog post where I was talking in terms of religion and the family and the claim that religion brings families together and describing how we get letters at TAE where, young people are being literally, driven out of their families. Families are being just shredded, torn apart, divorces, and people living with huge strain on the family because of differences in religious ideology. And it's interesting to me that something like religion has such a reputation of being this, bringing families together, and it's such a positive family thing. And it's like, no, it's hideous. It shreds these families. The only time it works for families is when everybody's on the same page, right?
That's exactly right.
And so when you have a situation where everybody's not on the same page, suddenly it's not working for the family anymore. So my question in the blog was, is this families using religion to establish closer bonds, or is this religion using family bonds to coerce people into, toeing the line and sticking with the religion and just staying in line and keeping their mouths shut, not saying something and not being different so that you can be accepted and not lose everything? It seems clear to me that religion uses families. It's not families using religion.
I think that's absolutely true. I know in the case of my family, we were raised Southern Baptist. Of course, now I'm an atheist, so we've had our bumps with that. my sister actually belongs to the Church of Christ, and that has been
Oh, that's
almost as
mine.
difficult.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
been almost as difficult because, they have very specific beliefs about baptism and things like that
Yeah.
are different. And she
Mhm.
and my mom have had a little bit of conflict about that. So,
Oh yeah, you're not Church of Christ. You're on your way to hell. You either have to be in the Church of Christ or you have to be doing exactly what the Church of Christ does and just calling yourself something else, but doing
yeah.
just what they do.
And I went through a period where I actually joined the Catholic Church, and you would have thought, oh
that's
my
Satan's
gosh.
minions right there. Yeah, that's like the devil pope or whatever. He's the Antichrist, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think as far as what religion's good at doing, it brings together people around here who like to eat. I don't mean that to be ugly, but really that's what it's for. It's for socialization and for eating, and the rest of it's just kind of extraneous.
Except for the girl that you were saying was in the Church of Christ, because they will not have a potluck in their church.
I don't know if their church is quite that strict. I don't.
Ours wouldn't. Ours would not use that building for a potluck. But let me just bring up one other thing real quickly. The other thing that you reminded me of is when you were talking about, how ugly and vile and just like verbally abusive people can be when you come out publicly and just sort of say, look, I don't want to be bullied by religion. I would really rather that in public spaces, I don't have to deal with this. And suddenly you get, just vicious, what I'm going to call vicious, ugly, threatening backlash. I mean, if somebody said this to you and it wasn't an anonymous thing, some of these things would be illegal, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so you've got this situation where people are being completely vile in their responses. And these are, generally people who are strongly defending in their minds religion. And on the same token, here you've got this American Family Association who is so worried that someone's going to say a naughty word on television. Right? You're going to, it's like there was a blog that I read one time about the difference between civility and decency. And it was saying there are some people that are more concerned about being civil than being decent. And the fact is, when somebody freaks out about a swear on television and then can send a death threat to somebody who says, please don't make me pray at school.
What's going on with people like that? That's insane.
They are more concerned with behaving in a civil fashion than they are with being truly decent people. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. And so it's all about appearances with these people. And it's ironic because I remember, some of the Bible stories and how, Jesus would talk about this idea of things being beautiful on the outside and rotten at the core. And that's exactly what this is. This is a person who would think nothing of sending a vile, hateful death threat to a gay couple, but at the same time, they're going to freak out that someone said "goddamn" on TV.
Right, and these are the same people who stoke those fires, and they kind of lead by example in the sense that they don't use any bad words on their broadcast. Like Brian Fisher, for example, he doesn't use any ugly words. But he's constantly lying about gay people, Muslims, atheists, and generally saying, well, they're just like Hitler. We'd be better off without them. So
yeah, use your language to deceive and to abuse. Yes. But don't make me hear a word I was told was naughty.
Exactly.
Because, then the TV might be too adult. We have to gear the TV toward 4-year-olds, really.
Right.
I mean, because
and God forbid you see a boob,
Yeah. Oh, perish the thought.
Speaking of AFA and Brian Fisher, he pretty much makes Right Wing Watch every single day from his podcast, which I have listened to. I don't know why my brain's going to rot. This is just the last few days. Homosexuality in the end is going to be responsible for the collapse of the Western economy.
Well, yeah, because it was pristine before we started this gay marriage push. We were doing really great economically, right?
Oh, and being selective in choosing partners proves that being gay is a choice.
Wow, you shouldn't even have to respond to that because anybody should understand why that's completely erroneous. It's just ridiculous that a person could say such stupid things. it's one of those things where you can just hear the person just simply reaching and trying to justify their position with any stupidity they could possibly throw at you, just throwing things at that point. It's almost like being attacked by a tiger and you're just grabbing like your calculator off your desk and throwing it, and your pens and pencils. Just throw whatever you've got at it, because it's just like you don't even care if it's actually effective or if it's actually going to work or if it actually would, have a real impact. It's like he's just thinking up anything that when you reach a point where you're saying that sort of stupid crap, you just have to say, wow, do you really understand how obviously stretching for justification you sound? It's like it doesn't even require a response because it's laughably stupid. And you have to know when you say such a thing that you're going to sound like a clown.
He doesn't care.
I'm sorry, Beth. It's so bad that the American Family Association, they don't even claim his words. We had a pro-gay thing outside their office, which unfortunately I wasn't able to attend, but a lot of my friends were, some of whom are Christians. Let me just throw that out there.
Sure.
But basically they came out and gave them water, and one of my friends is like, how can y'all how can you let Brian Fisher stand there and lie and say this stuff? And they're basically like, well, we're not really responsible for the content of his program. That doesn't represent our official views. Well, yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. But they don't want to admit that because, he's that far out there.
Oh, yeah. There is something to be said, though, are you saying these are American Family Association people?
Yes.
Yeah, when the American Family Association has to say, well, this doesn't really represent our position. Yeah, you've got to be out past Pluto at that point. You're like in another galaxy. Mm-hmm. That's because the American Family Association, they love to hate.
They do, and they make plenty of money doing it.
Yeah. But anyway, I've derailed you, and you have a story to tell.
That's fine. That's all part of the story.
All right, so we talked about the AFA. I think we were on personhood a little bit. So basically the new push, they've scrubbed it of most of the objectionable elements. So, what was it? Do you have the quote from their website where they were saying they were going to ban birth control and all that?
Actually, I do. Regarding ectopic pregnancies, it says in the rare case that the mother's life is endangered by the continuation of a pregnancy, whether ectopic or cancerous uterus, sound medical practice would dictate that every effort be made to save both lives.
Right.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Yeah, explain how that's going to happen.
Well, actually, I can, using the Catholic view of it, which this is actual Catholic doctrine. You can look it up. The principle of double effect, basically saying that instead of what would be normal practice for an ectopic pregnancy, which might be a drug, methotrexate, which is actually a chemo drug. It stops some cell division. A woman would take it, and then the embryo in her tube might just dissolve and die and be flushed out on its own. Or doing surgery and taking out the embryo and attempting to repair the tube. The Catholic position is that the whole tube should be just taken and chucked out, leaving the woman half fertile, if not less, just because they can't directly kill an embryo.
But the outcome's the same. If you just take the tube out with the embryo in it. Did I miss something?
No, that's the weirdness of the anti-choice side. Is the idea that what they argue would pretty much result in removing infants from a womb and then letting it die of organ failure. And there's a faction of them that seem to be okay with that, but not okay with an abortion procedure that would terminate the pregnancy. It's really bizarre.
Well, it makes my head feel like it just got smacked with a hammer. I'm just shaking my head here.
Yeah,
What?
Well, they also have this, if you have uterine cancer but you're pregnant at the same time, they're like, well, if you take everything out, then you weren't directly killing the embryo. You were just taking out a diseased organ, and the embryo or fetus, it just, happened to die. But
That's
you can't
bullshit.
directly kill it.
It's just bullshit. It's the same outcome. What?
Yeah, Yes, so that's actually
Well, here,
Catholic
if it
doctrine.
helps, you could think of it in terms of how we treat people that are born, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're, I guess, like suffering and dying in a horrible state, right? We can't really do anything to help you. We can't do an assisted suicide. We're not allowed. So you just have to sit there and suffer until you die. You know, even though we know you're going to die, we can't lift a finger to put you out of misery. All we can do is dope you up on more and more morphine, and you have to just endure whatever pain you're going to endure as your certain death proceeds. Because we're that inhumane as a society, right? I mean, it's this insane idea of, you know, protecting even a life that is like lost, not even lost all quality, but turned to like torture. You know, these people are not humane people. They're pretty crazy.
Well, it seems like they're more interested in God or whatever calling the shots rather than admitting that humans have some agency. I mean, it seems all about denying humans power over their own existence.
It absolutely is that, because if you view that human beings don't have the last word on what happens with human beings, and if you think that we're just supposed to follow this cosmic dictator, and when you start just making up things that this cosmic dictator has said, because all this crap is not anyway, I mean, this is not biblical. This is just crazy shit that Christians have made up in the interim. And they have this idea that you just, what's really weird is in my own lifetime, when I was younger, the idea of putting someone on life support, the Christians that I remember being around when I was little, all had an aversion to it. They were like, you can't play God. If someone's in an accident, they can't feed themselves and they are not conscious, then you just have to wait. And if they die, they die. And that's God's will. You don't put them on some kind of artificial, crazy medical technology. That's crazy. You don't get to play God. And now, in my lifetime, it has reversed to the point where if you try to remove somebody from life support, you get a big, huge Christian faction there protesting. Mm. And it's like, how did this happen? How did a life support machine become God's will?
Yeah. So, we're going all over the place, which is all right. This is fun. So, Twinkie, tell us, you said you grew up Southern Baptist, but maybe tell us a little bit about how you became an atheist and maybe some large events that factored into that.
Well, like I said, I was born and raised Southern Baptist, and I was very devout in the sense that I really wanted to understand God and do what was right. It was really important for me to read my Bible and to try to understand the best I could, because I felt like, you know, if God loved me enough to send Jesus down to die such a horrible death for me, then the least I can do is to try to really know him and know his creation. So I always was really interested in religion and knowing the truth about the Bible and all that kind of stuff. But when I hit age 14, I started hearing voices and seeing things. And because back in those days in the 80s, we didn't know very much around here about psychiatry, I assumed it was the devil. So I didn't say anything to anybody. And so for the next 3 years, as my symptoms got worse, I just kept quiet and didn't say anything because I figured I was under oppression.
Can I ask you something really quickly?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
What was the determining factor in you deciding that this was the devil rather than God?
Because I did not know anything about mental illness enough to know what those symptoms meant. The only thing I knew, and this was during the Satanic Panic, was I knew that Satan was after Christians and that he would send demons to disrupt them any way he could. Did
you believe, though, that God would send messengers?
Well, I hoped, but the voices never stopped. What I called persecution never stopped. So
okay, so this was like a wholly negative experience that you were having.
It was terrifying.
Okay, I understand. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And it didn't help that a couple of times I did go to my preacher and talk to him in confidence, and He said, "Are you listening to heavy metal music?" Well, yeah, I have a couple of tapes. There you go. That's how they got in.
Oh,
You got to
my
throw
God.
all that stuff away. So I still didn't tell my parents because I knew if I told them, they would know there was some sin in my life, something horrible. So I didn't say anything until I went off to college and just completely lost it.
Oh, man.
Just completely lost it. In the process of all my crazy delusion, I ended up losing my virginity, and my parents ended up calling me back home, and I finally just broke down and confessed. And I said,
Well, you were just in full-blown schizophrenia, though, right?
"Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
yes." I told them that, you know, the devil had been persecuting me, that I was hearing voices, that demons were telling me to kill myself, to kill other people, you know, that I had lost my virginity, which I, even to this day, don't fully remember all the details of because I was just so far gone.
Sure. If anybody's interested, just FYI, there's a book called Eden Express, and I remember one of the things in the introduction. It's written by Mark Vonnegut, Kurt Vonnegut's son, who actually was also schizophrenic. And when he submitted the manuscript to the editors, one of the things that the publisher had said was, "We're having difficulty when we read your manuscript differentiating between the things you were delusionally experiencing and the things that you really experienced. Like, we can't tell which parts of the book are your delusions and which parts of the book are reality." And he was like, "Well, fucking welcome to my world."
Yeah, exactly. Because it looks and sounds just as real as anything else.
Yeah, he doesn't remember either. Like, he's basically telling them, I can't, clearly there's some things that are absolutely have to have been hallucinated. But there's other stuff where you're just like, did that happen to him? Did that not happen to him? And he's basically saying, I can't tell you. I was messed up and I can't tell you.
Right. It's crazy, and it's really a hard thing to deal with alone. Especially, like I said, from 14 to 17. I was already going through so much, and to hide this out of such shame was just tremendous. So my parents ended up calling in a preacher who also taught psychology at the local college, and he talked to me briefly, and he says, "Yeah, I think you're demonically oppressed. You are saved, but there's demonic activity here." So they shipped me off to a
Did you say this person
hospital.
was a degree, like a licensed psychologist?
He teaches psychology. He's an actual professor who teaches psychology at the local Christian college. And he's also a minister.
I tell you, I burn every time I hear Liberty University promote their psychology program. And hearing you say this, I'm just like, oh my God. Mm-hmm. It really frightens me.
Well, it gets worse because they shipped me off to a prominent hospital in Memphis. And they spent a week doing physical tests, mental tests, everything. And at the end of the week, they called in my parents and said, "There's nothing really wrong with her except that she's fallen into a life of sin. And if she'll go back home and go get back in the church and repent, she'll be okay."
And how long? And this was from 14 till when?
17.
So for 3 years, you were going through this and you were telling people about this. I wasn't asking for help.
I didn't. I didn't until the very end.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't until your breakdown at college.
Yes, and when my parents found out I lost my virginity, then they were convinced that somebody was, slipping me drugs or something because, I would just never do that.
So they were more freaked out about you had sex than you hear voices?
Yes.
Great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's some priorities right there.
So since the hospital pretty much dismissed me and told me to go back to church, that didn't work too well. So for the next, I don't know, well, until I was 35, really. So ever how many years that was, I just lived with it.
Holy cow.
Yeah, I just lived with it. And it was terrible because I would go through highs and lows like bipolar disorder. The voices sometimes would get so bad that I'd just let go and just let them talk through me like they were somebody else. And it was just easier not to fight.
How were you even functional?
I don't know. I finally managed to graduate from college. I got a degree in biology and chemistry.
That's insane.
Yeah, I taught public high school science for 4 years. And then I actually got into graduate school into a doctoral program for biochemistry. And that was when I started having these delusions that the Antichrist was coming and I was going to be the one chosen to bear him. There was nothing I could do about it. Just crazy stuff. Crazy. But
and
it's
I calculated this, by the way. It was 18 years from 17 to 35.
Yeah. So when I told my mom that I had been chosen to bear the Antichrist, she finally, it's like the light bulb went on, and she said, "Oh, hell no. No, something's wrong. There's some disease. Something's wrong because this can't be true. It doesn't fit with my theology. And it would never be you anyway." So, you know. So,
oh, God.
Yeah. I went through a bunch of medication and a bunch of therapists, 2 near suicides and hospitalizations, and I finally, they call it schizoaffective disorder, and it's now well controlled. But I said all that to say this: when I finally got a lot of that under control, I looked back at my life and I said, how can I tell reality from fantasy? If my brain can be tricked so easily, what method can I use going forward to determine what's true from what's false? And that is how I got into science, skepticism, rationality, and it just changed my life because it just opened up a whole new door where I'm like, hey, you know, I do have a tool, and I can look at this and look at my past experience and realize I don't have to judge myself so harshly. I was going through a legitimate illness, and I didn't have any help. What the heck was I supposed to think? So it's been so helpful for me to have these tools and have people who understand.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. The idea that religion often uses what most people would consider intuition as being superior to reason. You know, how you feel about a thing, or how a feeling becomes more important than what you can rationally discern.
Right. And the idea, from religion was, well, first of all, the Antichrist isn't coming into the world that way, and if he is, it certainly wouldn't be through you. That's something that's going to happen to somebody else. And I believe it just like the Bible says it, but it can't happen to you, not here.
Were you not good enough to bear the Antichrist or something?
I guess not. I don't know.
So,
but, my mom she just looked at me and she was like, no, we're getting you to the doctor.
it took that, not the other, I hear voices, there's demons.
Yeah.
Because demons, in her worldview, they actually exist. So, of course, they could, oppress you and make you hear voices.
Yeah, and I mean, here's an example of religion doing harm where somebody for 18 years suffered with a severe mental illness because religious people around them were insulating them from getting real help. Mm-hmm. Thank you, religion.
Yeah, appreciate that. But, I had a lot of anger against religion and religious people for a long time, and especially my mom and dad. I had a lot of resentment and anger. But I've worked past all that because I've come to realize that, yeah, maybe they're adults and maybe they should know better, but they were raised in this and they were victimized too. And, we all just do the best we can with what we have. So.
What's that noise?
I have no idea.
I think that might have been some of Tracie. I think she muted herself. Okay.
I did mute. Mother. It was a cat. It was a cat going crazy on my door, and so I had to mute it.
So, Twinkie, during this whole time with your illness, you were still a Christian?
For most of it, yes. And I started doing a little bit of church hopping. I went from Southern Baptist actually into paganism. Because I just kind of like that warm, fuzzy, here's a surrogate mom for me and the goddess. And then I was like, I really need to get back in this Christian thing. Can I find a Christianity where I can kind of meld these two? Oh, Catholicism, because, I can pray to the Virgin Mary. She can pray for me. And after I got confirmed and got into that and got studying, I was like, oh, shit, this stuff is just as made up as everything else. So that was the point where I said, look, no more religion, no more anything. Let's just start at zero and see what we can find evidence for, which turned out to be not religion.
Awesome. So, and you are now an atheist. How long have you been an atheist, by the way?
Well, I started kind of dabbling with the idea around 96, actually. But like I said, I went back to religion and kind of back and forth. So it's really been within the last, I guess, 5 to 10 years, I've started taking those baby steps. In the last 5 years, definitely, I've just been kind of an out atheist, and much to the chagrin of my family. But my motto is that, if there are other people who hear my story and they're going through that, they need to know that there's somebody who's been through it and can talk about it and knows what it's like to go through that kind of problem and be an atheist. It's a lot on a plate, but I think we need more people willing to talk about this stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. J.T. Eberhard does a great talk about it too, about, skepticism and mental illness. He has depression and an eating disorder, and, it was so amazing to watch that. And, really, there's so much stigma, even among skeptics, even people who should know better. It's just like, oh, these people, they have some brain chemistry issues, and, they can take some medicine and, do some therapies and whatnot. And it's not like they're infected that, if you're around them, that you're going to get it too. It's not, but people seem to have these medieval ideas about it. Even people who should know better.
Well, and the other thing is the idea, and I'm sure, Twinkie, that you can speak to this more, but the idea that, suddenly you just get put on a pill and everything's perfect.
Right.
Trying to get that medication to a point where the person is be able to live with the effects of the medication and also offset the symptoms that they're having. That's a trick in itself. And you can have somebody that's taking medication that's like an antipsychotic, which I'm sure, Twinkie, they probably got you on or put you on for some point. Yes. You could get somebody on an antipsychotic, and that person then, has to deal with a whole lot. It has a big impact. The side effects are huge. And you have to sort of give the person a cure that still makes their life, a quality life that doesn't, suck all of their emotion and suck all of their, fun and will to live, because these things are often, suppressing people. And this is mind altering medication. Mm-hmm. Right. And so,
right.
Yeah. And it might be that you could be on this medication for 4 years and be doing fine, and suddenly it stops working, or it starts doing something that you didn't have a problem with before. And suddenly you start having trouble and you start spiraling out of control with it. And you have to have the wherewithal to then go back to your doctor and say, something's not right. My medication, something's wrong with it. It's not like something that's just like like you give a person 100 milligrams of this and they're fine. Right. It's like you have to start playing with this stuff and seeing what works and what doesn't. And even when you get something that, quote, works, it's not ideal. It's just better than voices all the time. Mm-hmm. And then you end up with a situation where you have to constantly monitor it.
Right. People don't realize how much responsibility goes into taking maintenance drugs. If I decide to get off my Seroquel today and I don't take it, and my husband doesn't make me take it, which fortunately he's not going to do that, but if he did, it's very possible that within a month I'll be on Facebook, saying that I've been chosen to bring the reincarnation of Carl Sagan back into the world. Yeah. It's just like that. I figured this time it would be some atheist-related thing instead of religious, but who knows? I don't know. And the medicine that I take tends to make me gain weight. So then you have folks that look at you and go, oh, fat, lazy. Oh, you're on disability. Taking my tax dollars. But, it's not like that. It's not like I'm sitting here, eating cake and donuts and watching Jerry Springer all day, It's very different from that, and it's very difficult, but, what do you do?
Yeah, we have we've got a society that is extremely unsympathetic to anybody that suffers from a disability that makes them kind of unproductive in the mainstream economic sense. Mm-hmm. If you don't fit into that model, you are a useless human being that's just sucking the system.
Right, and it doesn't matter that I finished college. It doesn't matter that I worked professionally for 15 years and actually did a good job despite my illness. None of that matters. The only thing that matters now is that I can't work. Therefore, I'm a taker. I'm just a fat, lazy taker. And I'm an atheist to boot. My God, what happened to you? You know? And that's the reality I deal with.
Yeah, I feel like I have to apologize for society on that level because we just have such a sick, narrow perspective of what is a valuable human being.
Well, it makes me stronger. I'm kind of one of those folks that, I'll take a punch, but I'm not giving up. If I was going to give up, I'd already be dead. So, I just look at it as a challenge and an opportunity. That's the only way I can do it.
Well, I want to say, too, make sure that I get this out before we, that this gets in somewhere in the podcast. And I know that, like, if you're like me or most people, a lot of people feel uncomfortable taking any kind of praise. And so if you want to, like, kind of think of this in terms of an abstract rather than a direct compliment, that's fine. But I want to say that we get letters all the time telling us how brave we are. At TAE, like, wow, we're so glad that you're willing to be out, and you're so brave to be out, and you talk about your atheism, and you're so upfront with it, and you don't care that people know you're atheist, and you're televising this thing, and I'm like, please don't tell me I'm brave, because I am out because it's not hard for me. I live in a city where nobody cares. I have a job where nobody cares. I have a family where nobody cares. There's nothing hard for me about being an atheist. There's nothing brave about it. And part of what I tell people is, if you can be atheist and it's kind of meaningless to you because there's no reason for you to be atheist, here's the reason. There's somebody else who can't be atheist because there's a lot of reasons that they can't come out. And seeing a bunch of other people come out and say, hey, I'm an atheist and I'm an average person, helps broaden that net somewhat, to where we end up kind of reaching the fringes more and more. The fringe gets broader and broader. You know what I mean? It's like we start absorbing the fringe and it becomes part of the mainstream, and that gets bigger and bigger. And hopefully one day there won't be a fringe. All of the atheists will be in that circle where everybody's safe coming out. And so when I hear a story from somebody that's like, look, the town that I live in is, you can't get a job and you can't, your family's going to disown you and your friends are going to leave you. And the only way people care about you is what church you go to. And that's the first thing people ask you when they meet you within 5 minutes. And they're saying, and I'm an open atheist, and it's not easy. And I look at that and it's just like, it's almost embarrassing to me. And I don't know, Beth, if you share this with me, but I feel almost embarrassed when people tell me that they think I'm brave or they want to thank me for being out. And I'm just like, there are people who are out in situations where they're really paying for it. And they aren't on television, right? I mean, they're just sitting in a small town somewhere sucking it up because they don't have anywhere to go and they don't have any support. And those people still came out and said, I'm an atheist, despite what they have to deal with. And despite the fact that they're not getting 100 letters saying, thank you for coming out. And it's almost a disproportionate sort of guilty thing where it's just like, well, why should I get these letters when this is the person that should be getting these letters? This is a person that needs the 100. I don't need a letter. They need a letter, right? That person needs a letter. They need people to write to them and say, thank you. Because they're all alone. I don't know. Anyway, that's just my sort of shout out to all the people who really are brave in coming out. I mean, and I don't expect people to do that. We tell them all the time. We counsel people all the time. Please do not come out if the personal cost is going to be great. Don't hurt yourself. Don't shoot yourself in the foot over this. Wait till things get safer. Wait till things get easier. You have to do what you have to do, but think about the cost before you do this. If there's a cost to be paid where you live. I'm not telling people come out no matter what. I would never say that to people. But if you do, go ahead.
Sorry.
No,
I feel
please,
particularly lucky in this case because since I am disabled, I don't have to rely on these people for jobs anymore. I can manage what money I have and be done. So that's kind of liberated me from that cycle. So now I feel like I owe it to people to be out, and because my family has chosen to love me, they have chosen me over their religion. I don't have that kind of pressure there. So that's one reason why I am out, and I work face to face with atheists in this community, and I work with Christians who are more liberal, more open, to kind of make safe spaces and groups for everybody. And it's not just me. I don't want to give the idea that, I'm the one that's created all this, but I am a part of it.
Sure.
And change is slow, but it is steady. And there is a place for the atheist here. There's a place for Christians who are more liberal, who don't hate other people, who support church-state separation. The things that are important to us, they can be found here. So, when you look at that and look at my situation, what it takes for me to keep going, what you do is a very integral part of that, because a lot of times when I'm down, it's you guys that keep me going. So I feel like we all kind of feed on each other in a good way.
Yeah, I agree.
So don't discount what you do. I mean, I don't feel like
I'm not. I feel
hero.
guilty when people call me brave.
Yeah, but we're all brave in some ways. I mean, all in different ways. And you have to be smart about it. You can't just come out to the world and just say, here I am. I don't care if I ever get a job again. You got to be smart. You got to be,
sure.
Think this out and be responsible. But it can be done. Even somewhere like this, it can be done.
Yeah, a lot of the misconceptions, a lot of the things we get about, oh, you're so brave, come from this misconception that Austin is in Texas.
Yeah.
when it's really not. It's like this little island. It rises above, that other big piece of land. We're not even anywhere near there.
Yeah.
All right. So, I don't know. We've talked about a lot of stuff. I mean, the stuff about the mental illness was just so important for people to hear. But you've got even a lot of facets to your story. You're just multifaceted, Twinkie.
I've lived a lot of life in my 40 years.
So there was another story to get into that I think, did it sort of spur you about the personhood and reproductive rights issues?
Yes, it's directly tied to that, and I can keep it pretty simple because it doesn't have to be a very long story. One of the reasons why I got into personhood so deeply is because back in 2010, I found out I was pregnant, which was not supposed to happen. My husband is not supposed to be able to have kids, and I'm 40, and, we're just not supposed to do that. So here I am one day, and I'm like, oh my God, for the first time in my life here, I'm pregnant, and I'm 40. What do I do? Well, it was kind of a no-brainer, even though I was scared to death. It was like our one chance. And so we decided, we're going to do this. Sure. We're going to do this. So all of a sudden one night, my nose started bleeding. And this was in a restaurant. It was a brand new restaurant we went to, quiet dinner. And all of a sudden my nose starts bleeding. And this is pretty graphic, and I'm sorry for that. But when I say bleeding, I don't mean just dripping. I mean, it was gushing. And when I tried to close my nose, it would back up in my throat. It was horrible. There was blood all over the bathroom. I started panicking. Didn't know what was going on. Ended up in the emergency room.
Good God. Were you having any pain?
No, I was in no pain. There was nothing.
Wow.
Just all of a sudden, I was losing all this blood. And it turned out I had something called a posterior epistaxis, which is a nosebleed way in the back where those veins are. So I had to have tampons put in my nose. Yes, tampons. Put in there under pressure, and I had to keep that in there. And they were like, why is this happening? And they were thinking, that Nathan had punched me in the face or something. I'm like, no. Well, then it was like, oh yeah, the pregnancy. You're pregnant. Yeah. Your blood pressure is 185 over 110.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Alrighty then. So, they basically told me you're on bed rest. You have to take this medicine. You can come in next week and we'll get you checked out. Well, before that time was up, I was back in the ER. I had gotten up. I was seizing.
Oh.
And the only thing I remember is they wheeled me to the room, and I got up to get on the ER bed, and I passed out. just seizing, crazy. When I came to, it was, the next day or late that night. They told me I had HELP syndrome. I don't know if that's something y'all are familiar with. It stands for hemolysis, elevated liver enzymes, and low platelet count. And just to kind of explain real simply, what it means is that my blood had started to clot all through my body. And the platelets were all clotting through my blood and destroying my red blood cells. So my kidneys were shutting down. My body was shutting down, my brain, everything. I was dying. So when they got that under control, and when I woke up, I found out that our child was dead, and I had to deliver. So, we went through that process, and I was so strung out on morphine, I can barely remember, giving birth, and I got to hold my son for what felt like maybe 60 seconds. 23 weeks old, and he was gone. So when I started hearing about this personhood thing, and I started realizing, under this kind of rule, I could have been investigated for this stillbirth. I might could have been jailed. If the baby hadn't died inside me, they might have forced me to continue the pregnancy, even though it would have been fatal for me. And also the fact that the doctors had told me if I get pregnant again, I will die. So if I should, by some chance, I'll either have to have an abortion or die. There's no choice. And so when this personhood thing came up, it became really, really personal to us. And that's why we chose to fight it.
Wow. I mean, that was quite a story.
It was quite a thing to go through. I
can't. I was sitting here kind of tearing up a little bit, and I'm thinking to myself, I can't imagine what you must have felt. I mean, you said you were on a lot of morphine.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, I can't imagine going through it. One of the pragmatic points that I thought of while you were telling the story, when I wasn't feeling completely emotional, was not only would this personhood thing intimidate you, but it would intimidate your doctors.
Yes.
And it would impact their ability to make decisions about your life-saving health care if they had to understand that they might be held accountable for the death of an unborn. And we just saw what can happen in those cases in Ireland.
Right.
Right.
Because it seems like nobody cares about, us women who bear these children. It doesn't matter about us. We're disposable.
Yeah, and just to be clear, HELP syndrome is a form of preeclampsia?
Yes.
Well,
and it is rare.
Right. And well, I mean, if you were seizing, you were in full eclampsia.
I was. Out of the blue. No warning symptoms, no warning pains. It was just that quick.
So if, the only real treatment for preeclampsia is to get the baby out.
Yes.
So, but if they couldn't have induced labor legally, then yeah, you would have died. You and the baby both. And
yeah, and here's the real shocker about the thing is when I came home one day and my mother had a Yes on 26 sign in her yard that she had gotten from church. And I remember speaking to her about it, and I said, "Are you going to support this?" And she said, "Well, yeah, they're giving out signs at the church." And I remember just bursting out in tears, and I said, "Mama, I don't want to die."
Oh my God! There is so much wrong with this.
I know. And she said, "What are you talking about?" And she starts tearing up. She's like, "Honey, what are you talking about?" And I said, "Do you not understand?" She said, "Well, isn't it just a thing against abortion?" I said, "No, it's not that simple." And I explained to her what would happen, and she actually became an advocate for the No on 26 group. In her own way, amongst her friends.
Right.
But I was so proud of her because, again, she chose me over her religion, over what her preacher said. And when she did not vote yes for it and the amendment was defeated, her pastor got up and berated them at church in front of everyone for voting no.
Boy, separation of church and state, right?
Yeah.
the church was giving out signs to vote yes on Prop 26. Wow.
Yes.
And, I mean, boy, tax exempt and handing out signs on how to vote.
Yeah.
That's, number one, like, minor problem with this compared to what you're talking about. It's a major problem socially, but in your story, that might be just a minor issue. But as an aside, that's messed up.
It's part of the Christian privilege, that it's just expected. It's expected.
We're not being political. We're just handing out vote yes on Prop 26 signs at church.
Right. And if you don't vote the way we say, we're going to dress you down and tell you that the blood of innocence is on your hands. Right.
But the other thing you talked about, right? Let me just make sure people are clear on this. You were sitting at a restaurant.
Yes.
Having as far as you knew, perfectly normal pregnancy.
Yes.
And suddenly you were in an ER.
Yes.
Losing blood pretty quickly.
Yes.
And in a very bad state that later almost killed you.
Right.
Okay. And I just want people who say that women should be forced to gestate because what's a couple months of inconvenience when you're talking about an infant's life? Because, pregnant gestation is like, nothing, right? No, it's not nothing. Right. It comes with risk.
It does.
And this is why you can't force people to gestate, because this is a decision they have to make because it can kill them. And it can kill them even when they're sitting there thinking, I'm having a normal pregnancy and there's nothing wrong. They can be dead before they know that their pregnancy is not normal.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's a risk in any pregnancy, no matter what age, no matter what risk factors, no matter what.
Yeah. And you cannot force people to take that risk.
What's so bad in my situation is that I have had people, they're no longer my friends, but they were before, who, when they find out that I'm pro-choice, have actually said to me, you deserve to be scalded alive, just like these babies you want to kill. And it always strikes me very deeply because I chose to be pregnant. I chose to try to bring that pregnancy to term. I chose my son.
Right.
And for them to sit here and say, you're pro-abortion, you want to kill babies, you should be murdered and tortured in the same way, makes me want to just, I don't know, it just makes me lose my mind and want to just shake them until their teeth fall out.
Well, this is why when people say that it's not, when people try to frame it as pro-life or pro-abortion, that is so wrong. Mm-hmm. Because I have met too many people who I know in almost any circumstance they were in would never have an abortion. But they would never force that decision onto another person. They are pro-life and they are pro-choice. They are, the difference between them and the people who call themselves pro-life are that the people who call themselves pro-life are actually anti-choice. Right? Because a person who says, if I find out I'm pregnant, I'm going to have the baby. I wouldn't abort. That's a pro-life person. That's a pro-life position.
We like to call them forced birth. That's a term that we coined during the personhood campaign, that they are forced birth because you're going to give birth to that baby no matter what.
Well, in a weird way, it removes the choice from everyone. Right? I mean, what you're saying is that even if you, quote, choose to have the baby, it's still not your choice. You're legally compelled. So you don't get a choice. Your decision, whether you're in agreement with the fact that you're compelled to do it or not, is a bit of an irrelevancy. There is no choice. And I wonder, like for myself, how that isn't the state owning the child.
That's a good point.
Well, it's the state owning your uterus. It's the state.
Well, but at the same time, they are stepping in as the advocate for the child. They're taking the role of the caregiver for the child, the ward that is like their ward, not your ward. They're saying that you're going to be used to bear their child.
And these are the same people who, they don't trust the state for anything. They don't trust the government. They hate the government, a lot of them. But they do trust the government with their religion and with your body.
Yeah, I mean, if the government is going to compel a birth, I think the government needs to be responsible for the thing that's born.
Absolutely.
These should be children. These should be wards of the state. You know, I mean, it's so weird that people don't understand that when the state compels a birth, this isn't your choice. It's not your baby anymore.
It's a running theme down here. I don't want my tax dollars going to pay for your babies. I don't want to have to pay for your health care. I don't want to have to pay for you this, or that. But I want to tell you what to do with your body. I want to tell you what choices to make.
They want government to be so small that they can shove it up a woman's vagina and into her uterus.
That's right.
That's how small they want government.
It is weird. It's just so there's so much wrong. You know, not to get in too much of a tangent, but there is. I read sometimes about like articles that are talking about lawsuits regarding paternity and maternity and parents' rights, and I do not. There are times when I just think our laws regarding parenthood are just absolutely insane. They are just completely whack-ass crazy. I don't know how they make any sense at all and how they figure these things. You know, I saw some court wanted to take away some guy's paternal rights. He wanted the paternal rights, but they were going to take it away from him, saying that he wasn't invested in the child, that he wasn't showing an investment. The mother wanted to give it up for adoption, and the state was saying, sure, give it up for adoption. And the father was saying, wait, but I don't want my baby adopted out. I want my baby. And they were saying, well, but you haven't really been involved with it, so we're just going to relinquish your rights.
That's crazy.
I'm sitting here thinking to myself, what about all the guys that you saddle with child support payments, and they say, I don't want to be involved with it, and you say, but we're gonna freaking nail you with those rights, and we're gonna nail you with those obligations. And it's like, wait a second here. So you can strip this guy of his rights because he doesn't want to be involved with the kid, although he does want to be involved. But then this other guy over here is saying, I don't want to be involved, and you're saying, no, you have to be involved. You can't give up your paternal rights. I was just like, wow, this is schizophrenic law. Like, I don't even understand this. And, you know, when it comes to women, it's absolutely just over the rainbow crazy. But even when it comes to it's just like there's something weird with us, with sex and parenthood. And I don't know what the hell is wrong with our culture.
Well, Tracie, the thing about men giving up parental rights or not having parental rights with adoption is, have you read The Child Catchers by Catherine Joyce?
Ooh, no, I saw the book promoted.
Okay, well, it's a good book. Everybody out there should read it. It's about adoption and evangelicals and how there's so much corruption. A lot of those rules that say that the birth father has to be either very invested or that his parental rights can be stripped very easily, that is something that has been lobbied for by adoption advocates. And not saying anything's bad with adoption and stuff, just right. That that's been lobbied for by some people who want to make adoption a lot easier.
It's just so crazy though, because if you could make a case that non-investment in the child means I shouldn't be obligated, or that I don't have to be obligated, or you can just that my obligation becomes that flimsy, I don't know how they go after child support. It's like, this is crazy. How come these guys can't say, well, I'm not invested clearly, so I shouldn't be paying? I mean, it's absolutely insane how it's almost like they're going to get you coming or going.
Well, yeah,
one way or the other, you're going to conform and pay. And boy, they're all over your business, the state, right?
Yeah. Well, so, this new initiative that's illegal yet coming up, when is that going to be voted on, Twinkie?
2014.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got plenty of time to do our fact finding and all that good stuff. And last time I did a lot of accounting because they made a lot of wild claims about the money. So I expect I'll be doing that again this time too. But the only thing that I know to do that works is to tell the truth. Mm-hmm. And tell it every chance you get.
Is there any campaigns, any place people can give money?
I don't think there's anything set up yet. But when it gets closer to the time, I'm sure I'll be talking about it a lot on our blog, Deep Fried Freethinkers.
What is it?
It's the Deep Fried Freethinkers. That's the name of our group.
Okay.
And you can find that at deep-friedfreethinkers.blogspot.com. We've kind of been on hiatus right now, but we're going to start back up. And as this personhood thing comes out, we'll be posting a lot of information and links for people who want to follow it.
One tactic that I've been seeing is these personhood amendments will usually be against IVF or IVF or embryo freezing, at least.
Yes.
And going against that, I think, has a lot of traction since a lot of kids have been born through IVF, especially with legislators. And getting the infertility awareness groups, they have actually fought personhood a whole lot.
Yes.
So they're pretty good people to partner with. Resolve is the organization, the National Infertility Organization, and they do this kind of advocacy all the time because, you know, it's weird. It's, you know, abortion, you know, people getting rid of fetuses that they don't want, but also embryos that people do want. There's all it brings all these people together, I guess.
Right. And we did have, I think her name's Atlee Parks Breland, who was a very, very strong advocate because she knows about IVF. I think that was Parents Against Personhood. And her work was just very valuable. She's just one of the great heroes of our group, her and Kristen Hemmons, who was on the Rachel Maddow show. So I expect these ladies to step up again. We plan on stepping up again because we do know that IVF will be under attack. They've already said no freezing of eggs, and they still hold to the idea that birth control and Plan B are abortifacient, and so therefore should not be allowed. They don't say that in the wording of the text, but that's what they want. That's their position.
Right, and they don't accept evidence because there's no real evidence, especially for Plan B, that it works in any manner against implantation. But evidence doesn't matter to them. So
right,
you know.
Yeah, it's what is that scripture that they're always quoting from Jeremiah about I knew you in the womb, and they'd never quote the part about being a prophet and a king or whatever all that the rest of the verse was. You know, it's just that narrow definition.
Right.
Therefore, no birth control. Therefore, no IVF.
Aren't there other scriptures that talk about how if God, you know, is with you, nobody can stand against you?
Yes.
I mean,
yeah, but you're taking that out of context, right?
No, I'm just saying. It's like I would think that it's really interesting to me that a God who doesn't want abortions to happen has so much trouble stopping them.
Yeah.
That he needs all these people to do all these things, and it's like, how did this God suddenly become so ineffectual? Right? A God that flooded the world suddenly can't stop a single abortion by himself. What the hell happened? Has he gone senile?
Well, when you ask those questions, you're going to get very standard answers down here. First is you're taking it out of context, or I don't know of any scripture that says that. And when you point it to them, it's like, I'm going to pray for you because you're trying to use the Bible against me. And
I'm just saying, he flooded the whole globe. He sounds like he's got some kind of power. And it's, you know, if he can kill like an entire planet full of beings, couldn't he? I mean, are you saying that if God didn't want this abortion to occur, people could make it happen anyway?
It's free will, Tracie. Free
and that's
will.
Satan. That's Satan.
Right, then it doesn't mean that much to God. If your free will to have an abortion is more important to God than stopping the abortion, isn't that God's choice? Isn't that God's free will?
It's not.
And he's making a choice there too, right? He's made his choice. Why can't these people live with it? Follow God's example. He's telling you that he doesn't think it should be stopped. He wants these people to exercise their free will. Let them.
Well, you know, God sent his own son, and this was, you know, after he was born, he was killed. That's
infanticide.
Yeah.
Except I guess he was an adult, but
still,
murder your own kid. That's saying something. And if Jesus, you know, I mean, could anything have stopped? Could a person have stopped that if that's what God wanted to happen? That's always that question. If you could go back in time and stop the crucifixion, would you? If you believe it was, you know, true.
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Would you stop it? Because if you wouldn't, then you're as bad as all those people you rail about who let the poor Son of God die. You're just as evil. But if you did stop it, ooh, look what you're doing. That's one hell of a catch-22 evil plan right there. Isn't it?
It is. It really is.
Yeah, I don't know. They'd find some way to weasel out of it. But
it's called all caps. I will pray for you.
It is.
Bless
You're
your
right.
heart.
Seriously.
Bless your heart. I'll pray for you.
Mm-hmm. Bless your little heart.
I don't let
So
those
good.
Satan doubts creep in. I just know that I trust God.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my!
I hope I haven't scared everybody off of Mississippi completely.
I don't think so. I think you've been a great guest so far.
Oh yeah,
thank you.
yeah. It's been awesome to have you. It's as great as I remember.
Well,
Our
thank you.
conversation being.
I feel bad in some ways because, Mississippi has so many problems, and I don't want to leave the impression that there's no hope, because there is. There are good people, but, we just...
Are there 50?
Yes.
Can you find 10?
I believe I can find 50. And I think as long as we keep working together for, common goals, I think there's a future for us. It's not going to be easy, but we can do it.
It's
Yeah.
just going to take a while. I mean, y'all
Yeah.
are just having integrated proms now, aren't you?
I think that's Georgia, isn't it?
Oh, was it Georgia?
Is that Georgia? I don't think it was.
Wait. What is this?
Okay, there's apparently some schools have completely privatized their prom back in the Jim Crow days. So
Don't even. Shut up. You're saying they have racist proms still?
Mhm.
they're not school sponsored, they're private.
Sure. No, I understand what you're saying. Is they found a work, like, we will find a way to subvert the law so that we can stay racist and have
Right.
our prom. Yes. Oh,
Right.
wow. I did not know this.
Yeah, there's a story that comes out every year or so that somebody's trying to have an integrated prom in Georgia or Mississippi or Alabama or anywhere where they haven't had a school sponsored prom in 40 or 50 years.
That's sad.
Yeah, I don't think that's Mississippi. We have private proms to keep gay kids out. That's been in the news.
Yeah.
We're not racist. We're homophobes.
Yeah, we're homophobes. We're
Don't
not
confuse
racist.
us with the racists.
And the
There's a
racism
long
that we-
tradition of racism. These newfangled
Yeah.
homophobes. It's like a whole different thing.
Most of the
Oh.
racism you're going to find around Mississippi is, it's not overt. It's more covert. It's more insidious. People have this idea that we have the KKK running up and down the streets. That's not the way it is at all. Most people don't even like the KKK, but they do like this institutionalized, kind of hidden thing where you kind of talk about those people.
Yeah, there's code words and everything.
Those people. Right.
Yeah.
The blacks.
Well,
I'm using air quotes here.
And sundown towns.
Yeah.
I lived in Johnson City and went to college there. And I always heard from multiple people that Irwin, Tennessee, which was a couple miles outside of town, was a sundown town. That black people weren't allowed to be there after sundown.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard that like from everybody. And I don't know. It may still be true. It's possible.
There are so many. There's like a small town where I hold like an annual thing. It's like an annual celebration, just like a tight-knit group of people. And I never knew. It was like one year I was like invited this gay couple a few times. And one year, one of them finally told me that it was like a notorious like gay crime site. Like apparently there was like a deadly gay bashing there that was infamous. I had no idea. And it's just one of those things where it's so weird because if you go there and you're not in the out group, if you're like one of the people that's in the in group, you get all the sunshine, smiles, and faces, right? You get all that great small town Southern fried hospitality that is like just, oh, these people are wonderful. Look how warm and how friendly and just happy to see you and, howdy do. And it's incredible. And then when you hear like, this is the same group of people that like killed some gay, it's like, wow, you don't really, I guess it doesn't really cross your mind when you're in that in-group, because it's not something you would think about. But the moment you start thinking to yourself, what would I feel like in this town holding hands with my Black boyfriend? And suddenly you start thinking, wow, I'm not sure that would be so well received, as like, as it would be for just me and my white husband, right? And so you have this issue where the town itself is like so warm and so inviting, but only if you're in that in-group.
And that's called,
anybody on the outside, and it just turns ravenous.
And that's called privilege.
Mm-hmm.
Just by the way.
Which is not a dirty word.
No, it's not. But yeah, and now I'm all feeling bad, because then we're going to get all these emails that are like, oh my God, I'll never go to Mississippi or Tennessee or Georgia or Texas and blah, blah, blah. And how do you live in those hellholes? And we're like, well, first of all, we do have some of that privilege, white privilege. If nothing else, we've got that when we go to these places. But, there are still actual, genuine, happy, nice people that would be nice to the gay people, that would be nice to the Black people. That it's just there's a culture in there, and it's getting better. It's not. I like to talk about how bad it is, but then I don't like it when other people talk about how bad it is, because it's like, oh, you're making it sound like worse, because we still do have a love for these places.
Yeah, sure.
Well, and there's a lot of beauty.
Yeah, oh yeah, they're the most gorgeous places you'll ever find.
And low cost.
Tennessee, oh yeah. North Carolina, oh, gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous.
Oh yeah, the Carolinas are gorgeous. They are gorgeous. And I remember when I was a kid, every year in the summer, driving up to Georgia, getting a big old bag of peaches, big as a freaking softball, just sweet and juicy and just crazy, just on the roadside, people just selling them. There's so much beauty in the South and in the Southern states. I would be the first one to admit it.
We have the best food.
It's pretty good, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But just gorgeous, scenic areas.
Fried chicken.
If I was going to give somebody a couple of reasons to come to Mississippi, I would say, first of all, we do have universities. We do have Unitarian Universalist churches and liberal churches. We do have humanist groups and atheist groups. You may have to look a little bit harder than the newspaper to find them, but we're here and we are supportive. And another reason why you should definitely come to Mississippi, at least to visit, is because we have slug burgers. And I don't know of anybody else that has that.
What is that?
Well, imagine a hamburger where instead of 100% beef, it has a filler, like maybe a soy filler or some other type of cereal grain filler or such.
So it's almost like a veggie burger?
Sort of. I mean, it does have some beef in it, but it's got a lot of grain or some other kind of filler in it.
Kind of like meatloaf.
And it's deep fried and it's so good.
Oh,
mustard, pickles, and onions is the way that they're traditionally. It was something that came around during the Depression era, because beef was so expensive. So that's definitely a reason you should come. If you come to Northeast Mississippi, don't leave until you try a slug burger. They're really good.
All right, I'll have to do that sometime. You got to come out here and get you some barbecue. Texas barbecue.
I would love to come to Austin. I'd love to move to Austin. My parents actually lived there for a while, but I think we're going to be stuck here in Mississippi probably for a long time. There's so much work still to be done.
Well, you need to be the salt and light of Northeast
I can
Mississippi.
probably be the salt. I don't know about the light.
I can be maybe a warm glow.
Nathan is the light. I'm just the salt. I'm the feisty one. He's the one that's funny. A little more low-key.
Yeah, you could be the fire.
Yeah. We make a good team.
Are you going to go back to Skepticon this year?
Absolutely would not miss it. Would encourage everyone to try to make it if they can. It was wonderful.
And it's in the other M, Missouri.
Yeah. And also for folks who are in this area, July 4th, there's always a FFRF I can't remember the name of it now, but it's near Talladega. It's a great thing to go to. Lake Hypatia, that's the name of it. You could look that up on FFRF's website. Every July 4th we do that. Have great speakers, lots of fun.
I love that. I love your dialect. July.
Did I say that?
Yeah, July.
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 July 4th.
It is nice. The southern dialects are very nice, and they're I have a nostalgia for the southern states, despite their shortcomings and their failings, which are substantial in some cases.
I get it honest. Both sides of my family have been here for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Farmers, sharecroppers, poor folks, but we made it.
I guess. This is going to be like a very, very Southern Fried episode. The only other episode I think that might have been as Southern Fried is when we had Jerry on here, Jerry and me going at it. You, me, and him on a podcast? That
would be crazy.
We ought to do that. We'll call him. Have you talked to him? Much?
I don't think I have.
Oh my God! Go look him up. Go watch his sermons like right now as soon as we get off here.
Will do.
All right. So, anything else? We just been chatting. Whatever. I don't even care. We got all the websites: deep-fried freethinkers at blogspot.com.
Right, and I'm on Facebook. If anybody wants to ask me questions or talk to me or just tell me have a weird voice or something, that's cool.
And what's your profile name?
It's Twinkie D.
And you want to spell that?
TWEENKY. And on the Facebook is DEE because I had to put in a last name.
Yeah. Like
it stands for disaster. D for disaster. But yeah, Twinkie D. You shouldn't have any trouble finding me. It's the picture of the girl, the telescope, and the big Twinkie.
All right. Well, this has been awesome. So this is Beth signing out.
This is Tracie saying goodnight.
And this is Twinkie D. Delighted to be here. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.